The gravel crunched beneath Eve's boots as she walked away from the compound. The coastal air was colder than earlier, wind picking up, carrying fog that blurred the distant docks into ghostly silhouettes. Her duffel bag rested against her shoulder. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her instincts, those sharpened in deserts, jungles, on Blackwater night raids, already told her she was being followed. A black SUV rolled out of the shadows behind her. Its engine purred, expensive, maintained, silent enough to suggest planning. Two more vehicles flanked it moments later. Their headlights stayed off. They trailed her without rushing. Predatory patience. Eve didn't break stride. She reached the edge of the abandoned dockyard. Rusted cargo cranes towered over the water like skeletal giants. Rows of decaying shipping containers formed a maze of metal corridors. Still, she didn't run. Her heartbeat stayed steady. She'd been ambushed before, by insurgents, by militias, by men who believed numbers guaranteed victory. She learned. A long time ago, the most dangerous thing a soldier could do was show fear. 3 SUVs blocked her path as she stepped onto the pier. Doors swung open. Damon Riker stepped out first. He wasn't wearing training gear anymore. Instead, tactical vest, steel-toe boots, gloves, a heavy pistol holstered to his thigh. Behind him stood 5 recruits, 3 from training earlier and 2 new ones, bigger, more eager to impress. Their postures told her everything. This wasn't intimidation. It was punishment. Eve exhaled slowly through her nose. "You brought backup," she said. Riker smiled. "You humiliated me. I return the favor." "That what this is?" she asked. "Reputation management?" "No," he replied. "This is a message." Eve dropped her duffel bag to the ground. The heavy strap thudded against concrete. "Walk away," she said softly, voice steady. "No paperwork, no consequences. I'll forget this happened." Riker laughed. "You think you're negotiating?" She scanned the men, who was nervous, who wanted violence, who would follow orders without thinking. Reese was there, wrist bandaged, face pale. He shifted his weight uneasily, avoiding her eyes. Eve focused on him. "You don't have to do this." Reese swallowed, shame tightening his jaw. "I don't have a choice." Eve shook her head. "You always do." Riker motioned toward his men. Lights! Floodlights snapped on from the SUVs, glaring beams cutting across the pier. Shadows vanished. Now everyone could see clearly. Eve stood illuminated, the only calm body in a circle of violent intent. Riker rolled his shoulders. "No rules, no cameras, no more holding back." Eve remained still. "You sure you want that?" He pulled out the pistol. The wind carried the faint smell of oil and the sea. Water slapped against barnacle-covered pilings below. Eve didn't show fear. She didn't even blink. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't draw a weapon unless you're ready to lose it." Riker smirked. "Try me." He raised the gun. Eve moved, not with panic, just purpose. SEAL conditioning engaged instantly. She stepped into his line of sight, grabbed the gun's slide with one hand, and twisted under his arm. The weapon snapped downward, jerked free. She stripped the magazine, racked the slide, ejected the round, and tossed both into the water in a single fluid motion. Plunk. Gone. Riker froze. The recruit stared, stunned. "Next bad decision?" she asked. Riker roared, "Get her!" 3 men lunged. Eve pivoted into the first attacker's space, snapping her elbow into his sternum. His breath vanished. He collapsed to his knees. The second recruit swung a baton. She ducked beneath it, swept his ankles, and guided him to the concrete. He hit the ground hard, air knocked out of him. The third tried to grab her from behind. She hooked his arm, locked it against her shoulder, and dropped her weight. "Pop!" He screamed, falling on his side. Reese stepped back, shaking. "This wasn't the deal, Riker. She's—" "Shut up and hit her!" Riker shouted. Reese didn't move. Eve held up her hand. "Reese, walk away." He hesitated. eyes flicking between her and Riker. Riker barked, "You walk, and you're done here." Reese froze. Eve stepped closer, not threatening, just honest. "You know he'll throw you under the bus. You've seen how he treats his own men?" Reese's throat tightened. Shame and fear warred behind his eyes. "Don't let him control your future," Eve said. Reese dropped his baton and backed away, palms raised. "I'm out," Riker snarled. "Coward!" "No," Eve said quietly. "He's smart." Riker pulled a second weapon, a knife this time, a combat blade, serrated. He lunged. Eve shifted, sidestepping with surgical precision. She redirected his wrist, guiding the blade past her ribs without contact. His momentum carried him forward. She used it, locking his arm and pinning him against a shipping container. He grunted against the pressure. "You really don't know when to quit," she said. He spat blood. "You think you're better?" "I think," she said, twisting his wrist until the knife dropped. "You mistake cruelty for strength." She kicked the blade away. Riker shoved backward with a burst of adrenaline, breaking free. He staggered, wild-eyed, desperate. He grabbed a steel chain hanging from the crane. "Fine," he shouted. "Let's see what happens when you bleed." He whipped the chain toward her. Eve raised her forearm, letting the chain wrap around it. She yanked, pulling him off balance. His feet slid across the concrete, scraping. He stumbled forward. She pressed the chain against his throat, not tight enough to injure, just enough that he felt his own pulse hammering against the metal. His breathing became ragged. "You're not strong," she whispered. "You're scared." He strained against her grip. "I'll kill you." "No," she said calmly. "You'll remember me." She released him. Riker stumbled backward, gasping, falling to one knee. All arrogance drained. Police sirens sounded in the distance. Riker's eyes snapped toward her. "You called the cops?" "No," she answered. "I reported a suspicious convoy headed toward the docks. Dispatcher traced the plates. They linked to your company." Headlights appeared at the far end of the pier. More sirens followed. Reese backed farther away, hands visible, relieved. One of the remaining recruits panicked. "We need to go." But Riker stayed frozen. Eve looked at him, calm, almost pitying. "You could have been a leader," she said. "Instead, you chose to be feared." Police vehicles screeched to a stop. Officers stepped out, weapons drawn. Eve raised her hand slowly. "Unarmed, victim of attempted assault." Reese immediately did the same. "I'll testify." Officers swarmed the remaining recruits, cuffing them. Riker stayed on his knees, shock and disbelief trapped in his features. Eve leaned down, voice low. "Real strength requires restraint." She picked up her duffel and walked toward the flashing lights. Behind her, Riker finally broke, rage and panic spilling together. "You ruined everything!" Eve didn't turn back. "No!" she called over her shoulder. "You did that yourself!" The sirens faded into background noise as she stepped past the officers toward freedom. Every step away from the dock felt lighter, calm, controlled. She didn't need applause. She didn't need validation. She just needed peace, and she finally earned it. The morning sun rose slow and tired over the coastline, washing the sky in muted gold. It felt like a different world than last night. No floodlights, no shouts, no weapons. Just quiet waves, early gulls, and the low hum of a city waking up. Eve stood outside the precinct, arms crossed, duffel at her feet. The glass doors behind her opened and closed as officers shuffled back inside. The entire night had been statements, forms, and questions she answered without emotion. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She just told the truth. That was enough. A detective stepped out. Mid-40s, tired eyes, a coffee stain drying on his tie. "You're free to go, Lieutenant Carter." She didn't correct the title. She might no longer wear the uniform, but the identity hadn't left her. "Is he being held?" she asked. "Riker?" The detective let out a low exhale. "Yes, multiple charges. Assault with intent, conspiracy, unlawful detainment, weapons violations. We're already contacting federal." Authorities, because your report's triggered. Jurisdiction overlap with private military. Contractors. Translation. Riker had chosen the wrong victim. The detective hesitated before asking, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why didn't you press charges for attempted murder?" "You had plenty of grounds." Eve lifted her duffel. "Paperwork would take longer than he deserves." He blinked, confused, then impressed. "You're unlike anyone I've met," he said. Eve nodded once. "That's why I left places like that." He held the door open for her. "If anything changes, call me. We'll take care of it." She walked away. The crisp morning air felt sharper, cleaner, as though the chaos had been rinsed off her skin. At Apex Security Training Compound. An hour later, the compound didn't feel intimidating anymore. With police tape stretched across the gate, it looked like a wounded animal, powerless and still. A group of recruits stood near the entrance. Some held backpacks. Others clutched paperwork. They weren't training anymore. They were waiting for closure. When Eve approached, Reese broke from the group, jogging toward her. "You came back," he said, voice tight. "I needed to collect my contract termination papers." Reese rubbed the back of his neck. The bruising across his wrist peeked beneath the bandage. "You saved my career." "I didn't do it for that. You could have walked away." "But you warned me." Eve studied him. The last time she looked into his eyes, she saw obedience. Now she saw thought. Reese swallowed. "I'm sorry for how I treated you." "You listened to the loudest voice," she said. "You're responsible for who you choose to follow." He nodded. "I learned that last night." Before she could continue, a woman in a blazer stepped out of a black sedan by the gate. Her sharp posture and tablet announced she wasn't here to train. "Good morning," the woman said. "I'm Special Agent Mara Salas with the Federal Oversight Bureau." She flashed a badge. "We're shutting this operation down permanently." The recruits exchanged looks, relief and disbelief mixing together. Salas's gaze turned to Eve. "You're Evelyn Carter." "Yes." "You filed the anonymous report from the docks." Not a question, stated as fact. Eve didn't deny it. Salas tapped her tablet. "We've been watching this PMC for months. We needed proof of abuse." She gestured around. "You handed us everything we needed." Eve didn't react. Her victories weren't emotional. They were necessary. Salas stepped closer, voice lowering to something that sounded almost respectful. "You don't have to speak." I read the incident reports. "You didn't escalate. You endured until escalation became self-defense," Eve answered simply. "Violence is last." Salas studied her more carefully now, weighing something invisible. "We could use someone like you for federal training oversight. Better pay. No ego-driven commanders." Eve didn't rush the answer. "Send details to my email," she said. Salas smiled. "I will." As the agent walked away, Reese let out a low whistle. "You just got offered a federal job while standing on the rubble of the place that fired you." Eve shrugged. "Life is sometimes efficient." Reese laughed, shaking his head. "You're something else." She didn't reply. Words were a poor investment when actions already spoke. Inside the compound office, Eve entered one last time. The office smelled of dust, coffee, and a future that had collapsed overnight. She found her file on a desk, terminated before she even unpacked. She signed the release form. No attached emotion, just closure. Footsteps echoed behind her. "Leaving so soon?" Riker stood in the doorway, hands cuffed, flanked by 2 officers on either side. His face was swollen, jaw bruised, eyes bloodshot from a night of reality crashing down. He glared at her like a trapped animal. "You think you won?" he said. "You just destroyed something bigger than you understand." "No," she replied. "You destroyed it the moment you treated people like weapons." He strained against the cuffs. "You had everything handed to you. You think discipline makes you superior?" "Discipline doesn't make me superior," she said. "It makes me accountable." "You ruined my career. You ruined your own." He lunged forward in the split-second chaos of desperation. The officers tightened their hold. Eve didn't flinch. "You can't keep power," she said, voice low. "Not when fear is the only thing that holds it up." The officers shoved him toward the exit. He shouted over his shoulder. People like me don't disappear. Eve met his rage with calm certainty. People like you get replaced. Riker was dragged out. Silence settled inside the office, deep and permanent. Outside, closing the gate, Eve walked back toward the entrance. Reese and the other recruits waited. What will you do now? Reese asked. Live, she replied. A simple answer, a clean one. Reese nodded as if trying it on for size. Maybe I'll try that too. She slung her duffel over her shoulder. Stay sharp. Trust yourself. And if a leader ever demands fear to earn respect, walk away. Reese extended his uninjured hand. She shook it. Thank you, Eve, for showing us what strength actually looks like. She didn't answer with a lecture, just a nod. The gate closed behind her as she left the compound. The metal clanged, final, definitive. Walking down the shoreline road, she watched the sun glint off the water. Her reflection moved in the waves, shaped by the wind. Free of roles, expectations, and someone else's authority. No uniform, no rank. No proving, just herself. A phone buzzed in her pocket, an email notification from an unfamiliar address. She didn't read it yet. Instead, she stopped at a small cafe overlooking the ocean. An older woman behind the counter greeted her warmly. What can I get you? Eve considered. For the first time in months, she wasn't preparing for combat or surviving politics. She wasn't calculating the next threat. She wasn't bracing for impact. She was choosing. Coffee, she said. Black, the woman smiled. You got it. Eve stood by the window as the espresso machine hummed. The sea wind brushed her hair. Somewhere behind her, she could still hear echoes of last night, the chain hitting concrete, the sirens, Riker's rage. But that was behind her. When the coffee arrived, she wrapped her hands around the warm cup, feeling the heat settle into her palms. The world, finally, was quiet. Eve looked out over the water and whispered to herself, not as a seal, not as a fighter, but as someone choosing her own life. Real power isn't proven. It's recognized. She took a sip and walked forward, free. The shuttle rolled to a stop in front of the steel-gated entrance of the Apex Security Training Complex. A rusted sign hung crooked on the fence. Private property, no liability for injuries, not exactly welcoming. To Evelyn, Eve Carter stepped down from the shuttle, duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The wind from the nearby coastline carried salt and the faint smell of diesel. Workers on forklifts moved crates across the yard, ammo, training weapons, gear. Everything was loud, heavy, and alpha energy predictable. Inside the perimeter, a group of recruits gathered near the concrete courtyard, stretching and shoving each other. Their voices carried across the yard. New class started today? Yeah. Heard we've got some diversity hire. Snickers followed. Eve kept walking, silent and unbothered. Her dark hair was tied back. She wore a plain gray t-shirt, cargo pants, and boots. Nothing about her invited attention, yet she could feel eyes following her like radar. A man leaned against a Humvee. Tattoo sleeves, chewing gum like he needed everyone to know how unconcerned he was. That her? He muttered, not quietly. Another man whistled. She looks like she works reception. Eve stopped beside a table where a clipboard waited. She signed her name without comment. A shadow appeared behind her. You're Carter? The voice was low, gravelly, with a practiced dominance behind every syllable. She turned. Damon Riker, lead instructor. Former private military, rumor said. Everything about him radiated ego. He looked her up and down, unimpressed. You're smaller than I expected. Eve met his gaze without effort. You're louder than I expected. Some recruits choked back laughter, surprised she'd pushed back. Riker stepped closer, personal space close. This isn't the Navy. Here, we teach real combat. Real combat doesn't need theatrics, she replied. His jaw tightened. We'll see. He walked toward the center of the courtyard. Eve followed, still silent. A dozen recruits formed a loose circle around the training mat. Riker stood in the middle, arms crossed. All right, listen up, he barked. We start with our standard impact resilience test. You take a hit without flinching. It tells us who belongs here and who folds. A few of the men smirked. One cracked his knuckles theatrically. Eve didn't move. Riker gestured at her. Carter, front and center. She dropped her duffel and stepped forward. Riker addressed the group, voice dripping with sarcasm. Carter here is former Navy, SEAL, supposedly. Legend, right? Rumor says she never fails. The men laughed. Eve said nothing. Riker pointed to one of the largest recruits. Shaved head, heavy shoulders, fists like cinder blocks. Reese, you're up. He stepped toward her with the energy of a man who lived for permission to hurt someone. You sure? Eve asked quietly. Reese cracked his neck. Don't worry. I'll go easy. Riker interrupted. No, full power. Reese smiled wider. Eve inhaled once, slow and controlled. SEAL training had taught her to conserve energy until the exact moment it was needed. Here, restraint was harder than action. Riker circled them like a shark. You stand still. You do not block. You do not counter. Eve didn't answer. She didn't need to. Reese planted his feet. Fist pulled back. All brute force, no discipline. He swung. Her jaw snapped sideways from the impact. The sound echoed across concrete. Recruits reacted. Oh, damn! She tanked that. Hit her again, Reese! Eve's head turned back slowly. She rolled her neck once, checking for injury. The pain registered, dull, distant. Her eyes lifted calm as still water. Reese blinked. The confidence in his grin faltered. Riker smirked, stepping closer. That all you've got, Carter? No fight, no bark? Eve looked directly at him. You done? Riker raised his voice. No, she thinks this is optional. Hit her again! Reese hesitated. For the first time, doubt entered his posture. Eve spoke softly, controlled. You shouldn't do that again. Reese forced an awkward laugh. You going to make me stop? No, she replied. Physics will. Riker snapped. Reese, hit her! Reese swung again, faster this time. Eve moved, not aggressively, just enough that his fist grazed her cheek instead of landing. She hadn't broken a rule. She hadn't blocked. She simply tilted her head half an inch. Reese stumbled from the momentum he had expected to meet resistance. Eve remained perfectly still. Gasps rippled among the recruits. Riker's eyes narrowed. Stop showing off. I'm standing exactly where you told me to, she said. Reese charged a third time, anger overtaking discipline. His fist came in from the side, a wild hook. Eve's voice was quiet enough that only he heard it. Wrong angle. His knuckles collided with her raised shoulder, not her face. Her body absorbed the impact with a movement so subtle most people didn't understand what happened. Reese yelped, pain shooting through his hand. Riker exploded. I said no blocking. Eve turned to face him. Her expression didn't change. You said no countering. I didn't counter. You shifted your stance. You said take the hit. Not take it stupidly. The courtyard went dead silent. Reese shook his hand, trying to mask the pain. The smirk was gone, replaced by something raw, uncertainty. Eve took a single step forward, closing the distance between them until Reese had to look down to meet her eyes. She spoke softly so only he could hear. You don't test strength by swinging harder. You test it by staying standing. Then she returned her attention to Riker. Is the test finished? Riker's face turned a shade darker. For a moment, he didn't respond. Nobody disobeyed him. Nobody embarrassed him, especially not someone who didn't even raise her voice. He forced a laugh. All right, then. Let's finish it. One of you. Take her down. Another man stepped forward, lean, quick, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Coach, I got this. Riker crossed his arms. Don't hold back. Show her what real training looks like. The man lunged. Eve shifted her weight, grounding herself body and mind. In her head, she was back in SEAL training. No crowds, no egos, just timing. He threw a jab. She moved her chin just offline. The punch sailed past. He stumbled. He tried a knee strike. She angled her hips, letting it slide past her thigh. No aggression. Only precision. The courtyard erupted. What are we watching? She's not even trying. She's reading him. The man backed away, breathless. What is that technique? Eve answered without emotion. It's called discipline. Riker's composure cracked. He barked orders, desperate. Someone actually hit her! Another man stepped in. Then another. 3 recruits circled her now. Reese joined again, jaw clenched. Hit her together! Riker snapped. Drop her! Eve looked at the three of them, each with a different stance, different weaknesses, different intentions. She could dismantle all of them within seconds. Bone-breaking efficiency was muscle memory. Instead, she stood still. "Go ahead." Reese lunged first, and Eve whispered, "You just made a fatal mistake." Reese charged first. He came in with all the rage she had warned him against, shoulders tense, fists clenched, tunnel vision narrowing his world to one target, her. His boots slammed the mat as if force alone could guarantee victory. The two recruits behind him followed, an uncoordinated pack acting on ego instead of strategy. Eve's breathing slowed. One inhale, one exhale. Switch flipped. Reese swung a heavy right hook, same mistake as before, too loud. Too easy to read. She stepped into his space instead of away from it, body tight and centered. His punch missed wide, momentum carrying him off balance. Her hand snapped up, catching his wrist with a quick twist. Cartilage popped. Reese screamed as she guided him downward, not aggressively, just decisively. His body folded to the ground. She planted her boot on his shoulder, holding him without force. "Stop," she warned. But the others didn't. The lean recruit with fast footwork closed in next, attempting a knee strike to her ribs. She dropped weight through her hips, letting his momentum slide past her. Without breaking eye contact, she turned Reese's trapped wrist and rolled him aside. Her free hand grabbed the second man's collar. She pulled. He stumbled forward, chest exposed, center of gravity collapsing under him. Eve hooked her elbow around his neck, not tight enough to choke. Just enough to drop him flat on his back. His breath exploded out in a single helpless grunt. Reese tried to get up. She didn't even look at him. "Don't," she said. He froze. The third recruit hesitated, a flicker of doubt across his eyes. But pride pushed him forward. He threw a punch, a blind, wide swing that might intimidate someone who'd never faced real violence. Eve sidestepped once. Her foot swept his ankle. He hit the mat with a thud. Everything stopped. 4 seconds. 3 men down. She didn't take a fighting stance. She didn't need one. The courtyard fell quiet. Even the forklifts outside seemed silent. For the first time, the spectators didn't look amused. They looked afraid. Riker's mouth tightened. "Recruits, get up!" Reese groaned, clutching his wrist. "She broke my arm!" Eve corrected him, voice steady. "I rotated your ulna outward. Ligament damage. It'll heal." "That makes it better?" He spat. "You're still conscious." Her tone was flat. "That's the difference." Riker stepped inside the circle, fists clenched so tight his knuckles whitened. "You think this is a joke?" "No," she said. "I think this is unnecessary. You embarrassed my men. They embarrassed themselves." The recruits shifted uncomfortably. Riker's eyes went flinty. "You didn't follow the rules." "You didn't explain any." "I said take hits. You said don't block and don't counter," she cut in, voice level. "I didn't either." "They fell because their stance collapsed, not because I struck them." Riker stepped closer, invading her space. "Everyone here follows my system." "I'm not impressed by systems built on humiliation." Riker jerked a chin toward Reese. "Hit her again." Reese shook his head, backing away. Nope, I'm done." Riker grabbed him by the shirt, shoving him forward. "I said hit her!" Eve stepped between them. "Don't touch him." He froze, shocked. She had moved barely an inch, yet the air shifted. Controlled presence. Pure moral authority. Riker released Reese with a shove. "Carter, you think you're untouchable?" "No." Her voice was disturbingly calm. "I think you're predictable," Riker snorted. "Fine. If you're such a trained killer, fight me." Gasps and murmurs erupted. Eve blinked slowly as if bored. No, he wasn't expecting that. "You're afraid?" He taunted. "I'm uninterested." He stepped closer. "What's wrong?" "Scared you'll lose your reputation? Scared you can't take a punch?" Eve studied his posture. Forward-leaning, chin exposed, feet planted too wide. Someone who thought intimidation was technique. "The only person I need to prove anything to," she said, "is myself." "Then fight." "No." He leaned in until their faces were inches apart. "If you don't fight, you leave this program." I didn't come here for combat. She gestured around them. I came here to train, learn different techniques, and start a civilian life. Then you're in the wrong place, he hissed. Eve didn't blink. I'm in the wrong company. For a moment, something like uncertainty flashed across Riker's face. It only lasted a second, but she saw it. The crack beneath the bravado, he masked it with rage. Last chance. Throw a punch or pack your gear. Eve didn't move. Riker swung. His fist came toward her jaw, fast, fueled by anger instead of control. She waited until the last fraction of a second, then she shifted. One small pivot, heel rotating on mat, completely neutralized his strike. His punch sliced through air. Riker stumbled. She stepped behind him, turning her back to him with zero concern. Control is not weakness. His face flushed red. Stop dodging. I'm not here to hurt you. Riker grabbed her shoulder. A mistake. Eve seized his wrist, rotated, and locked his arm behind his back in one efficient motion. Pain drove him to his knees. No wasted energy. No excess, he thrashed. Let go! She leaned close to his ear. You don't teach combat. You teach dominance. Let me go! Eve released him instantly. Riker spun away, humiliated, scrambling to his feet. He jabbed a finger toward her. This isn't over. Eve looked at Reese and the others. He's going to push harder now. Be ready, Reese swallowed. Why are you warning us? Because leaders protect. She glanced toward Riker. Bullies escalate. Riker stormed to the equipment cage, unlocking it with quick, jerky movements. He pulled out a training baton. Heavy polymer, reinforced core. Not lethal, but painful. You want control? Riker shouted. Let's see control, he charged. Eve stood still. As he swung, she stepped inside the arc of the strike. The baton whistled past. Her palm struck his wrist. His grip loosened, baton flying out of his hand, skidding to the far end of the mat. Riker spun, desperate. She didn't counter. She just stood in front of him, not threatening, not aggressive, just unshakable. Her voice was quiet enough that only he heard. Your weapon doesn't change your skill level. Riker swung a wild punch. Nothing tactical, all emotion. She shifted weight, turned, trapped his wrist, and guided him to the mat. Pressure point. Shoulder lock. Controlled angle. He dropped with a strangled cry. Eve leaned in, voice calm, steady, dangerous, not because of anger, but because of truth. Stop teaching violence disguised as leadership. She released him and walked away. No victory celebration. No smug expression, just quiet certainty. Behind her, whispers spread through the recruits. She beat him without hitting once. She didn't even sweat. That wasn't fighting. That was science. Riker climbed to his feet, face red with humiliation. You're done here, he spat. Pack your crap. You're finished. Eve turned back, expression unreadable. I didn't come here to win. I came here to avoid fighting. She grabbed her duffel bag and walked toward the exit. A hum of dread followed her, because everyone could see something. Riker refused to admit. He had lost, and people like him don't lose gracefully. Behind her, Riker whispered to his remaining loyal recruits. Tonight. At the docks. No cameras, no witnesses. Eve didn't hear it, but she felt it. A shift in the air, the kind that precedes storms.